Welcome to Killer Case File Channel, the home of chilling true crime stories, where every detail matters, and justice always finds a way. If you love real cases packed with suspense, shocking twists, and lessons that stay with you long after the story ends, you're in the right place. Don't just watch, become part of our community. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Justice isn't just served here, it's told with every word. Imagine a man everyone trusted, a man who stood at the pulpit each Sunday, preaching forgiveness, love, and family. Parents asked him to guide their children. Neighbors waved as he passed, smiling warmly in his press suit and Bible in hand. But behind that perfect mask was a nightmare, one so chilling it would tear apart an entire community. This is the story of Reverend Thomas Miller, the pastor who fooled his flock until the truth clawed its way out of the shadows. And in the end, it wasn't the church or the town or even the police that revealed his secrets. It was the silence of the wife and children he thought no one would ever miss. Tonight, we unravel the lies, the betrayal, and the justice that proved even the holiest mask can't hide the darkest of sins. For as long as anyone in Brooksville could remember, Reverend Thomas Miller was untouchable. The little town of Brooksville, tucked away between cornfields and a river bend, had one church that served as its beating heart, St. Matthew's Baptist. And for nearly 15 years, Reverend Miller was its shepherd. He was the kind of man people wanted to believe in. Tall, polished, always in a crisp white collar and tailored suit. He carried himself like a man who had all the answers. He baptized children, married young couples, and led funerals with solemn grace. His sermons were fiery, weaving scripture with everyday struggles. When he spoke about temptation, people nodded. When he spoke about sacrifice, people wept. But those closest to him, especially his wife Sarah, knew another Thomas. Sarah was quiet, soft-spoken, and by all accounts, devoted at church. She sat in the second pew with their two children, Daniel, age 10, bright-eyed and playful, and Grace, age 7, shy but always clutching her mother's hand. Neighbors described Sarah as the backbone of the Miller household. She cooked meals for community drives, volunteered at the food pantry, and ran the Sunday school crafts table. But behind closed doors, whispers told a different story. Some neighbors recalled late-night shouting. One remembered Sarah showing up with sunglasses on a cloudy day. Another remembered the children's nervous laughter when their father walked into the room. But who would dare accuse a pastor? In small towns, appearances carry more weight than whispers. And Miller's image was pristine. Behind that facade, though, Sarah was slowly suffocating. She confided once to a childhood friend that Miller had a temper, one that flared when he felt disrespected, especially if she questioned him in front of others. Still, no one imagined what would happen next. It was a cold Friday evening in January when everything changed. Sarah missed her volunteer shift at the soup kitchen. Calls from friends went unanswered. By Saturday, the children missed soccer practice. At first, people assumed they were ill. But by Sunday morning, when Sarah's usual seat in the second pew sat empty, the congregation stirred uneasily. Miller explained it away with a smile. "My wife and kids caught a nasty bug. They're resting at home." Everyone believed him. After all, he was a pastor. But then came Monday. No one saw Sarah drop the kids at school. No one saw her car leave the driveway. By Tuesday, a neighbor called the police for a welfare check. Officer Marquez was the first on the scene. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Silence. When he tried the front door, it was unlocked. Inside, the house was unsettlingly still. Dishes were stacked in the sink. A lamp was left on in the corner. But there were no signs of Sarah or the children. Marquez moved deeper into the home, calling out, "Sarah? Reverend Miller? Police department." That's when he noticed something strange. The faint smell of bleach. The kind of smell that clings to walls when someone's been scrubbing too hard. Then, in the master bedroom, under the bed, he saw it. A streak. Not much. Just a faint smear on the wooden floorboard. Dark. Dry. Blood. Within hours, the house was crawling with investigators. Reverend Miller arrived mid-investigation, his face a mask of shock. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Police pulled him aside. "Reverend, your wife and children are missing. There's blood in your home. We need you to come down to the station." Miller put a hand over his chest like he'd been stabbed. He wept openly, saying, "Dear Lord, no. Not Sarah. Not my babies." To his congregation, watching from across the street, he looked like a grieving husband and father. But to Detective Angela Rodriguez, newly assigned to the case, something didn't add up. She watched Miller's performance closely. His tears came fast, almost rehearsed. His words were carefully chosen. And when she asked if he would sit for an interview, he didn't hesitate. That was her first red flag. Most grieving husbands stumble through shock. Miller looked like he had rehearsed every step. In the interview room, Miller clasped his hands, Bible resting on the table. He explained, "I was at a revival meeting in the next town Friday night. Got back late, around midnight. Sarah and the kids were asleep. The next morning, I left early to prepare my sermon. When I got back, they were gone." Rodriguez tilted her head. "And you didn't think it was strange that your wife's car was still in the driveway?" Miller gave a sad smile. "Sarah has family out of state. Maybe someone picked them up. Maybe she needed space." But Rodriguez noticed a faint outline of scratches on his knuckles. When she asked, he said, "Working on the church roof. Cut myself on a nail." It was plausible, but something gnawed at her gut. This wasn't a burglary. It wasn't a random disappearance. This felt personal. And the one person at the center of it all was the very man claiming to be brokenhearted. Detective Rodriguez wasn't working with guesses. She was working with science. The first set of forensic tests confirmed what she feared. The blood found beneath the Miller bed wasn't from a small cut. It was Sarah's. Not just a drop, not an accident. Enough blood to suggest she had been badly hurt, if not killed, right there in the family's own bedroom. And yet, Miller was still preaching. That Sunday, less than 48 hours after the police collected their samples, Miller stood at the pulpit. His sermon, broadcast across the county, was on enduring trials with faith. Congregants wept. They hugged him. They prayed over him. Detective Rodriguez watched a recording of that sermon later that evening, her jaw tightening. This wasn't grief. This was theater. And she was determined to end the show. Miller's alibi seemed airtight at first. He claimed he was at a revival meeting 30 miles away on the night Sarah and the children vanished. Several church members even backed him up. But Rodriguez dug deeper. She obtained cell tower records. And the pings told a different story. At 9:47 p.m., Miller's phone wasn't near the revival meeting. It was pinging right in Brooksville, less than half a mile from his own home. The timeline was broken. Rodriguez replayed his interview in her mind. The calm voice, the rehearsed sadness, the hand on the Bible. Now, his credibility was bleeding away, just like the evidence he thought he had scrubbed clean. Crime scene technicians returned to the Miller house with luminol spray, a chemical that reveals hidden blood traces. When they entered Daniel and Grace's bedroom, the walls lit up like a constellation. Tiny specks on the baseboards, droplets on the toys. The truth was horrifying. Whatever happened that night, the children had witnessed it. Rodriguez's throat tightened as she walked through the glowing blue stains. She wasn't just solving a case. She was carrying the weight of two silenced children. She vowed she wouldn't let their story end under the shadow of their father's lies. Miller's carefully crafted image began to crumble under the weight of Rodriguez's persistence. When confronted with the cell tower evidence, he doubled down. Phones glitch. Towers overlap. I was at the revival. Ask anyone there. Rodriguez leaned across the table. "And who drove your wife's car Friday night, Reverend?" "Because neighbors saw it leave and come back." For the first time, Miller faltered. His hands shook. His lawyer quickly called for a break. But Rodriguez had seen it. That split second when the mask slipped, when the pastor stopped being holy and started being human. News traveled fast. Pastor questioning wife and children's disappearance. The headlines splashed across the local paper. Congregants were torn. Some rallied behind Miller. Convinced it was a witch hunt, they held candlelight vigils, prayed loudly outside the police station, and scolded Rodriguez publicly. Others whispered in hushed tones. They remembered the late-night shouts, The bruises Sarah explained away, the children's fearful eyes. For the first time, Brooksville looked at its pastor and saw him not a leader, but a suspect. The turning point came with the autopsy, though there were no bodies yet. A forensic pathologist, reviewing the blood evidence, testified to Rodriguez. The volume of blood loss in that bedroom, there's no way she survived it. Sarah Miller is dead. And in the garage, investigators uncovered a chilling detail. In the trunk of Miller's car, outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for updates. Protesters gathered, half demanding justice for Sarah, half chanting hymns in Miller's defense. Placards read, "Free our pastor." Justice for Sarah, Daniel, and Grace. Brooksville was split down the middle, its soul on trial alongside Miller. Midway through the trial, the prosecution unveiled a new piece of evidence. Sarah's final selfie. It had been pulled from her cloud account. At first glance, it was a smiling photo of her and the children in their bedroom. But in the reflection of the window, faint but undeniable, was Thomas Miller, standing behind them. The timestamp? Just hours before the family vanished. The jury leaned forward. That photo wasn't just evidence. It was Sarah's final testimony. Captured forever. Elena Foster stood before the jury, her voice firm. Thomas Miller preached love, but lived with control. He wore faith as a mask while violence ruled his home. Sarah tried to leave, and for that, she and her children paid the ultimate price. Today, you hold the power to ensure his mask never deceives again. Whitman countered with desperation. This is grief, not guilt. Don't let speculation destroy an innocent man. But the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The jury wasn't just hearing facts. They were hearing Sarah's voice from beyond the grave. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman's voice was steady. We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Miller, guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps erupted. Some shouted in disbelief. Others sobbed in relief. Miller didn't move. He clutched his Bible tightly, but his lips trembled. Rodriguez closed her eyes, not in triumph, but in quiet respect. Sarah's story had finally been heard. The judge's words echoed through courtroom. Thomas Miller, you used your position of trust to mask unimaginable evil. For the murder of your wife and children, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel struck. The case was over. Miller's mask had been shattered permanently. The community was left broken but wiser. The church disbanded. The building was later turned into a shelter for domestic abuse survivors, funded in part by Sarah's family. Detective Rodriguez visited Sarah's grave quietly one evening. She placed a single flower down, whispering. They believed him, but in the end, they heard you. The verdict didn't just echo in Brooksville. It traveled across America. Every news station replayed Sarah's voicemail. Every headline screamed about the fallen pastor. Podcasts dissected the trial. Documentaries lined up to tell the story. The preacher and the blood. Faith, fear, and family. The pastor who prayed. Miller had become infamous, not just as a murderer, but as a symbol of betrayal, a warning that monsters often hide behind a mask of respectability. And yet, amidst all the noise, one truth resonated louder. Sarah's voice had been heard. Brooksville's once thriving church sat abandoned. Weeds cracked the parking lot. The stained glass windows gathered dust. For years, that building had been a fortress of blind faith. Now it was nothing more than a hollow reminder of how easily power can be abused when no one dares question it. Some members wept for the man they had followed. Others wept for their guilt. For the years they ignored Sarah's bruises, her silence, her cries for help. One woman told reporters, "We thought we were protecting God's house. But really, we were protecting a monster." The town square raised a memorial. 3 candles, 3 plaques. Sarah, Daniel, Grace. Every year, on the anniversary of their deaths, people gathered, not in silence, but in promise. Promise to listen. Promise to believe the silenced. Promise to never let status, title, or power shield violence again. The tragedy became a turning point. Domestic violence hotlines saw increased calls. Local shelters received more donations. Sarah's story wasn't buried. It became a lifeline for others. Detective Marisol Rodriguez was celebrated as a hero, the one who cracked a case, who refused to be blinded by Miller's influence. But she never saw herself that way. Late one evening, after the trial, she drove to the riverbank where Sarah's belongings were found. The air was cold, the water still. She whispered into the night, "I couldn't save you, but I made sure they knew the truth. You deserve that much." For the first time in years, Rodriguez allowed herself to cry, not just for Sarah, but for every woman silenced by someone more powerful, every child failed by the system, every victim whose story was rewritten by lies. Meanwhile, in prison, Thomas Miller was no longer Reverend. He was just inmate number 49852. The Bible he once used as armor now sat untouched on his bunk. The respect he once commanded was gone. Guards watched him with contempt. Inmates whispered his name like a warning. He had lost everything: his freedom, his church, his mask. And in losing it all, he became exactly what he had always been: just another man accountable to justice. The story of Pastor Thomas Miller wasn't just about murder. It was about power. It showed how power, when unchecked, becomes a weapon. How communities, blinded by loyalty, can become accomplices. How silence can kill just as surely as violence. But it also showed the opposite: the power of truth. The power of one detective who refused to look away. The power of one woman's final words, carried through a voicemail, strong enough to shatter lies from beyond the grave. And in the end, it showed that no matter how long injustice hides, justice comes knocking. So what do we learn from Sarah's story? That appearances deceive, that respectability can be a mask, and that no one, not a pastor, not a politician, not a man of wealth or status, stands above truth. And to anyone listening now, feeling small, overlooked, unheard, Sarah's voice proves something powerful. Even whispers echo when the truth stand behind them. Miller's lawyers filed appeal after appeal. They argued that the trial had been unfair, that the jury had been biased, and that the media circus had poisoned the outcome. They demanded retrials, reduced charges, and loopholes. But every time, the court struck them down. The evidence was undeniable: the shoe prints, the text messages, the autopsy, the testimony. Each appeal only tightened the noose of truth around Miller's name. Television networks dramatized case. Crime shows recreated the crime scene with actors. Documentaries pieced together the investigation. Even streaming giants wanted rights to the story. In every telling, Sarah's face appeared, her smile, her laugh, and her gentle eyes. And in every retelling, Miller's mask was stripped away further. The beloved pastor was no more. He was remembered as what he was: a manipulator, a predator, a murderer. Brooksville carried scars. For years, whispers haunted the streets. How could we not see it? How do we let this happen? Parents clutched their children tighter. Neighbors checked on one another more often. The church community, once fractured by shame, began to rebuild, not around blind faith, but around accountability. A plaque was installed at the town square. In memory of Sarah, Daniel, and Grace, let us never stay silent in the face of suffering. During the trial, dozens of women came forward. They spoke of controlling partners, of abusive relationships, of times they had been silenced by people in power. Sarah's story became their story. Her courage, even in death, gave them a voice. Shelters reported more calls. Police received more reports. The silence was breaking. And though Sarah could not be saved, her tragedy sparked change. Years later, Detective Rodriguez was invited to speak at a national conference on domestic violence. Standing on that stage, she told Sarah's story, not the gory details, but the human ones. She spoke of a woman overlooked, of children forgotten, of a pastor idolized while hiding horrors. Her words ended with a truth that shook the room. Justice doesn't begin in the courtroom. It begins the moment we decide to listen. In prison, Miller aged quickly. The authority, the power, the charm, gone. He became frail, gray, and irrelevant. Other inmates whispered his story. Guards watched him like a cautionary tale. He died alone in his cell, with no congregation to mourn him, no family to pray for him, no community to honor him. His obituary was short, his legacy tainted. So, what does this story tell us? That evil doesn't always look like a stranger in the shadows. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it preaches sermons. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. But no mask, no status. No title can hold forever against truth. Sarah's whispers, her bruises, her pain, ignored for years, became the very things that destroyed her killer. And justice, though late, came with a roar.